to Susan Trainer's accordion tutorials. Today we're going to look at various different aspects of the accordion, going for a brief history, types of accordion you can find, the parts of accordion and the genres. So let's get started. Before the accordion became known as the accordion, it was the sheng in China. It looked a little like this and was used through a mouthpiece that went into a set of reeds, also sort of nicknamed the mouth organ. They first started being created around 1000 BC. There are some kind of showings of it earlier than that, but that's the first recorded date. Through the years then there was different variants of this reed instrument that's progressed into the likes of the harmonium, gradually getting to the shape of the accordion that we know today. This was mostly created, we believe, in Germany in 1822, but there are many countries that consider themselves to have created the accordion due to the various variations that there are of it. So let's move on to the types of accordion there are. So next we're on to the types of accordion that you can find. So there's both diatonic and chromatic. So the chromatic accordion is for each note that you play, pulling the bellows in and out, it's the same note. But diatonic, when you push a note down, it's one note and then you pull the bellows out and it's another note. Sort of similar to the way that a mouth organ works. So there also are piano and button accordions. There's different systems within button as well as chromatic piano accordions. So generally I would play a piano chromatic accordion, but there are varieties within the button systems. There are also different sizes of accordions. You get from 8 basses up to 120 basses. So if your accordion doesn't look like this one pictured, then don't worry too much, as it could just be that it's a different size of buttons. So you get 8, 12, 24, 48, 72, 80 and 96, just to name a few. 120 tends to be the biggest one that you can get on a Stradella accordion. I'll explain Stradella a wee bit more later on. Next we're going to move on to parts of the accordion. Moving on to the parts of the accordion, you have your keys, your bellows, your bass or buttons and straps. So on the keys, it's the same as you'd find on any piano or keyboard, just from C to C, and they all play the same no matter if the bellows are played in or out. There's also couplers or switches, sometimes they're called. These give you different sounds or tones depending on what you're playing. They can give different effects and they change the reeds that are played. With the bellows, without the bellows you wouldn't get any sound from an accordion, as when you pull the bellows it creates a pressure that puts air through reed blocks. Now the reeds in an accordion aren't what you'd find in the likes of a clarinet or an oboe. It's in a block and these have valves that let the air through and sound the note. They also can create dynamics depending on the amount of pressure you put in or out in the bellows. So if you're pulling it really hard, it's going to be really loud, or you can make it quieter just depending on the way that you use it. There's also techniques, bellow shake and tremolo and things that you can add later on as well. With the bass, there are two types of bass on an accordion. These could be a Stradella or free bass. Now with Stradella accordions, which is what I play myself, there are 2 rows of single notes and then a major chord, a minor chord, a dominant 7th chord and a diminished 7th chord. So you could play C major, for example. Free bass, every note on your buttons is a different note, and it's all individual, no chords. There's also an air button on the side as well, just to help bring your accordion in easier. Now there are also 2 sets of straps, one at the top and bottom of each accordion to secure your bellows closed. There also is 2 straps that go over each shoulder. These can be adjusted to suit. There's also back straps that you can get to adjust it to suit yourself. Sometimes people prefer to have it more strapped on, sometimes not. It just depends on personal preference. So with accordion, there's a variety of music that you can play. You can play your Scottish folk trad music, which will be your waltzes, jigs, reels, slow airs, but there are variations within that as well. There's Scottish polkas, just depending on what you're playing. There's also French musette waltzes, which would be your classic sort of French music that you'd hear. There's usually an accordion in there playing that. And polkas as well. They could be a sort of German polka, again the Scottish polkas, so those other varieties, as well as your Italian tarantellas. There's also classical music that you can play on accordion, as well as jazz or tangos. These all feature within a lot of music, and you'd be able to learn a vast amount of repertoire through any of those genres, just depending on personal preference. So I'd like to say thanks for listening, and hopefully that's gave you a brief overview of the accordion. Come back next time and we'll be looking at keys in a bit more detail. See you next time.